let us all do we can to build a better future. So more BS is happening in Chicago. Hey, Mayor Brandon Johnson, more of your hypocrisy is happening. Mayor Johnson calls on state to build migrant shelters outside of Chicago. Great. How's this working out for us? Because now Chicago is not only a sanctuary city, but hey, let's build the migrant shelters outside of Chicago. Say it with me, folks. What could possibly go wrong? Because the other counties and cities and towns won't be a big fan of that. I can promise you that. Mayor Brandon Johnson's ongoing calls for Governor J.B. Pritzker to build more migrant shelters took a new turn Wednesday, as he indicated additional sites should be located outside of Chicago, even with state funding. Speaking to reporters after presiding over a city council meeting, the mayor did not directly answer questions about the fate of the next round of migrants, whose 60-day deadline to vacate the city-run shelters arrives February 1st, with harsh winter weather expected to remain. And it's been horribly cold these past few weeks. It's slightly getting warmer. It's getting to the high 30s, low 40s. No one gives a damn about 40-degree weather, though. If you're a Wire fan, you'll know what I'm referencing. No one gives a damn about 40-degree weather. If you know the Wire, you know what I'm talking about. Y'all are giving me a whole bunch of 40-degree weather right now. Instead, he pivoted to a place of the onus on the state to construct more sites and push them to be built elsewhere. So Chicago, being the sanctuary city, is now, turns out we can't have the migrant shelters here. This is what I've been saying, especially when the DNC convention comes here in Chicago. This city's going to be a powder keg, ready to blow. What the state committed to doing back in November, that process has not moved as quickly as this 60-day policy will hold, Johnson said. This policy will really attach to a larger operation that included 2,200 beds. That's what the state of Illinois is committed to doing. Pritzker on Monday said that Johnson administration had not told the state where they would like us to put our resources to build new shelters. So we can't help if they don't identify those locations. Johnson countered Wednesday that the state had received a number of locations that they could build a shelter at. He did not elaborate, but city officials said that they recommended to Pritzker's administration potential sites outside Chicago, sometimes with specific buildings in mind, a notion the governor's office has just disputed. And, again, just keep in mind that the state of Illinois can build a shelter anywhere in the state of Illinois. So the state does not have to build a shelter in Chicago, he said. I want to put this article down here for a second. So Heartland's Media, we started off in 2017 covering a lot of protests. A lot of them would always end up in front of Trump Tower, and a lot of them would be calling on Trump to be impeached. Trump's a fascist. And, hey, we got to make Chicago into a sanctuary city. And speaking to all those activists and organizers, they never really understood the bigger picture. And I could say this with absolute arrogance and pride. Chicago was never ready to be a sanctuary city. It was just words, feel-good points. And a lot of these politicians, a lot of them who identify themselves as progressive or came to these progressive events, use these feel-good talking points to make themselves look better than Trump. But now when push comes to shove, the city doesn't have the resources to take care of these migrants. The city doesn't have the manpower or locations to make sure these migrants aren't exposed to dangerous elements or exposed to disease. Now, I understand that a lot of these people went through hell to come here. But the thing is, these shelters are not safe. These shelters are not adequate enough. And our city government is now looking like a fool in front of the whole world. And I don't want to speak on other sanctuary cities, but at least in Chicago, we're just not ready for it. And the safe thing to do for the safety of the city, its overall health, its economy, and our system as a whole, the migrants have to go. I know it's a horrific, controversial statement to say, but already they're talking about building shelters in the middle of a very cold winter. This is torture. And there are so many videos being posted on social media of a lot of these migrants being exposed to the elements. I don't want to see that. These kids being exposed to the elements. And there's so many videos on social media of regular Chicagoans whose families been living here for generations yelling at the mayor and the city council for the fact that families who've been living here for generations are being ignored. Chicago public schools being shut down, community centers shut down, lack of resources to rebuild said communities. So you can understand why this is all going to kind of blow up, especially knowing for the fact that the DNC convention is coming here in Chicago and that Chicago is a corporatist Democrat machine center. It's a hub for the DNC. It's a recipe that's going to blow up in people's faces. Continuing on. In the fall, Pritzker announced the state would fund a 200-bed shelter at a former CVS in Little Village, which has since opened, as well as a 2,000-bed winterized base camp in Brighton Park, the latter backed by $65 million in state funding that was scuttled after Pritzker's administration objected to the former industrial site, citing concerns over environmental health hazards. That's right. In Brighton Park last year, there was talk about a shelter being built there, and the community, the residents, were not informed by the state, city, or county. The residents protested. The residents didn't want the shelter there, but also, number two, they were giving the warning to the city government, the state government, that, hey, this is an industrial site where people, men, women, and children would be exposed to dangerous chemicals and other hazardous materials from that industrial site. Welcome to America. I know you went through a lot. We're going to put you on this industrial site. If you start coughing up a lung, it's not our fault. Since then, that money has languished as the governor has expressed frustration with Chicago's handling of the migrant crisis, saying he was deeply concerned about Johnson's plan to hold off on opening new shelters. And there's our mayor, Brandon Johnson. Johnson announced a 60-day shelter limit policy in November, but he delayed enforcing it ahead of the first eviction date on January 22nd as heavy snowfall and low wind chills pummeled the city. A second extension was announced until February 1st, but temperatures are again expected to dip below freezing then. The threat of more extreme Chicago winter has added a new wrench in the city's migrant response as resources are fast dwindling for migrants, the first of whom were bused north by Texas Governor Greg Abbott in August of 2022 as a protest of liberal cities who support open immigration policies. Since then, the total number of migrants who arrived in Chicago has surpassed 34,000, and the $150 million Johnson appropriated in his 2024 budget for their care may run out before the end of this year. We can't take care of these people. The city can't do it. The city just can't do it. I know it sounds harsh. It sounds brutal, but the city just can't do it. And residents here in Chicago, from the north side to the south side to the west side, are going to become more vocal, especially as this economy becomes more and more extreme. For the safety of everyone, being a sanctuary city is the worst mistake any politician can support. The mayor was mum Wednesday on how many migrants would be affected by the February 1st eviction date. They face to leave the city-run shelters. As of last week, 710 of them have gotten extensions to the 60-day shelter limit, but that number may have grown as notices come on a rolling basis. Johnson on Wednesday applauded that 1,100 migrants did find their own housing, which are being helped by the city government, by the way, since the 60-day policy was announced in November, but it's unknown how many of them were in the batch of 710 who got extensions and how many were required to exit at later dates. So we don't know what's going on. The city-run migrant shelter system has been at capacity for months, with 28 buildings currently housing 14,200 individuals. In total, more than 8,000 shelter eviction notices have gone out. Johnson stood by the policy Wednesday despite the need to delay it twice already, though he acknowledged he is open to reevaluating. We're going to continue to review. This is an evolving crisis. And it is a crisis. Our mayor doesn't seem to understand the big picture. And as we get closer to the DNC convention, that'll be happening here in August, our politicians played a game of being a fool. Our politicians are playing the game of, let's see how long we kick this can down the road. The economy is going to be the number one issue for 2024. And as Americans struggle to make ends meet, we're left wondering who's going to represent us, who's going to fight for us. And as people's emotions get the better of them, they're going to want to blame somebody. Now, obviously, yes, people will blame politicians, but I see, unfortunately, people's emotions getting the better of them and starting to blame the migrants too. I don't like this game that the Florida and Texas governor are playing with the sanctuary cities, and I don't like this game that the sanctuary cities are playing with their own people. This is a powder keg that's ready to blow, and I see it happening. I hope I'm wrong. Maybe it's an over-exaggeration, but the city of Chicago cannot take care of the migrants. And that's that.